Okay. Hi, everybody. We're going to get started. My name is Dr. Shmuel Shields, and this is part 2 of our Guard Your Health series. Today, we're going to be talking about water and staying hydrated, and what should you be drinking. Okay, so the first thing I want to say is there are many Torah references to water, and Torah is often compared to water. So one of the very first references we have here is in Parshas B'Shalach, where it says, "V'yalchu shaleshes yamim b'midbar." They went for a 3-day journey, a 3-day period in the midbar. V'lo matzu mayim, and they didn't find water. So water is often a metaphor for Torah, and the sages interpret that Torah was neglected for the 3 days in the midbar, which caused the spiritual deterioration to a point that it almost led to a rebellion. And Nevi'im therefore enacted that reading of the Torah should take place 3 times a week. So there shouldn't be more than 3 days. 3 days shouldn't elapse without Torah. In Yeshaya, there's also a pasuk that says, "Kol tzamei lechu l'mayim," all who thirst go to water. All who thirst is interpreted by Metzudas David as those who wish to learn. Go to water, Rashi interprets it as to Torah. So we see some interesting references to water and Torah. We also know in Shir HaShirim, actually before we do Shir HaShirim, we know that the world really cannot exist without water, and neither can it exist without Torah. And I think Rabbi Akiva says it best. We know the famous story when he was, when the Romans said they forbade the study of Torah under pain of death, and Rabbi Akiva continued teaching Torah. And one of his Talmidim or somebody came to him and said, "How could you teach Torah? You could be put to death." So he gave a beautiful mashal of the fish in the water, and just to give you the short version of it, he basically said, just like a fish cannot live without water, we cannot live without Torah. So he was willing to risk giving up his life, because either way, he knew he couldn't live without Torah, and if he had to give up his life, he would be willing to do that because he couldn't survive without Torah. So we see the importance and the connections between water and Torah. It's interesting in Yeshaya, actually in Shir HaShirim, there's in Medrash Rabbah, they also make a reference to, just as water leaves a high place and usually goes to the lowest place, it flows down to the lowest place available for it. Torah also will leave a haughty or an arrogant person, and it remains with one who is lowly and humble. So that's another reference to Torah and water. What I want to talk about today is physically our need for water, the role it plays in the body, and we could also see, just in the way that the Ribbono Shel Olam created the world, we see something very fascinating. We see that if we think about it, the most important nutrient that we need to survive, to live, is really air, oxygen. And when Hashem created the world, He obviously knew that this would be the most important ingredient to sustain life, and air is found everywhere. It's the most abundant ingredient. You never have to worry if you want to take a hike, or you go to another state, am I going to have enough air? Do I have to bring air along? Of course not. You want to climb a mountain? No problem. There's air wherever you go. A person can only survive 4 or 5 minutes without oxygen. So Hashem made it readily available, so we should never be deprived of it. The next most important ingredient is actually water. And it's interesting to note that the human body is made up of almost 2/3 water, and the surface of the earth also is made up of about 2/3 water also. About 70% of the earth's surface is 2/3 water. So just as water is another essential nutrient, a person, if he has water and he doesn't have food, he could live for maybe 40 days. So water is essential for life, and it can sustain us for a long amount of time, and it's readily available because of its importance. There's a lot of water that's available to us, and we have to not lose sight that water is also a miracle. Like the Ramban says, everything is really a miracle, but we tend to get used to it. We take it for granted, and it just doesn't have that miraculous quality to it. But water is also a miracle, and the fact that we have it and it's available, we should appreciate it and not take it for granted. The human body, as I said earlier, is about 2/3 water, which means that our body weight, 2/3 of it is water. So if you see a man that weighs 180 pounds walking down the street, 120 pounds of his body weight is actually water. So water is essential for all of the cells in the body. All the body cells contain and need water to carry out their vital work. Every bodily function and biochemical reaction requires water. Transporting nutrients requires water. It assists in digestion, absorption, circulation, excretory functions, toxic removal. It maintains body temperature. Water even acts as a it naturally suppresses the appetite. I actually am a nutritionist in private practice in Queens, and I tell my patients all the time, drink water before your meal. It will suppress the appetite. It also prevents fluid retention. It helps to metabolize stored fat, which is important for weight loss. It maintains proper muscle tone, relieves constipation, lubricates the joints, even improves endocrine gland function. So we can see water is essential for so many body processes. The next question we might want to ask is, how much water do we need? And how much should we be drinking? Now, there's an old adage out there that we should be drinking 8 cups a day, which again doesn't really make sense, because how could we say 8 cups? People have different body sizes, different weights. People live in different climates. People have different levels of activity. People have different diets. So our water intake is going to have to be somewhat adjustable to the individual needs for water. The important thing is we don't want to get dehydrated. So there is a formula that could be used. Again, it's approximate, but it gives us some guidelines. And of course, always check with your healthcare professionals about your water intake, because certain people who have either kidney disease or congestive heart failure and possibly other medical conditions may have to curtail their fluid intake. But the average healthy person, we have a formula of 1 8-ounce cup for approximately every 20 pounds of body weight. So for the greater part of the population, about 6 to 8 cups is probably going to do the job. And then of course we'd go down or up a little bit depending on body weight. We also should keep in mind we do get a lot of water from the foods we eat, and we also get water from other beverages as well. So when we're drinking tea or coffee or other types of beverages, we do get water from those beverages. But water for hydration should be the beverage of choice, because water, cool water, will rehydrate body tissue faster than anything else and more efficiently than anything else. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to give you just some other information on water and the importance of water, and what we can do a little bit maybe to doctor up water a little bit, because after all, the Rebbeinu Shalom blessed us with sensory organs, and many times different things appeal to us, whether it's taste or smell or certain colors and so on. So it's in my experience, in my practice, I have seen people will tell me, I just can't drink plain water. They really should, but they feel plain water is not going to do it for them. I encourage them to drink plain water, but in any event, there are some different options with water. One of them might be adding just some fresh lemon or lime to the water. Another might be adding a little bit of juice to give it a little color. You don't want to really add too much juice, because then you're going to be adding a lot of sugar. And sugar will slow down. Anytime you add another ingredient to the water, it slows down its process of rehydrating us. It takes a little bit longer. Other things that could be done, you could take frozen fruit or vegetables, fresh vegetables, or even fresh fruits, and you could infuse them. You could let them sit in a pitcher of water in the refrigerator overnight or something, and then you'll get a little more flavor in the water that way. I know they do sell a lot of different types of water today. Types of water that I would avoid would be any water that has added sugar or any kind of added sweeteners. Even if they're artificial sweeteners, I would avoid water that is artificially colored, flavored, or has any added sweeteners. If it's just naturally flavored, or they use some sort of fruit or vegetable infusion, that would be, I think, a better alternative. Okay. In addition to that, when we drink things like tomato juice or other beverages, I mentioned herbal teas, even when we drink soup or you drink a glass of milk or whatever it is, you do get a lot of water from these kind of things as well. So it's important to know that even if you don't get the exact number of cups of water a day based on your body weight, if your diet has more fruits and vegetables and things like that in it, you will get water from some of these things as well. It's important to keep in mind that we do lose about 2 to 3 quarts of water a day. And how do we lose water? We lose it, especially in the hotter weather, perspiration. We lose it through excretion, through urination. And so these are 2 of the major ways. And the third way that we lose water is breathing. Every time we exhale, we see, if you exhale in front of a mirror or piece of glass, pane of glass, you will see vapor that comes out of your mouth. So this is why it's not uncommon for a person to lose 2 to 3 quarts of water a day, and it has to be replenished. So I want to just mention there are certain things you have to be aware of. Dehydration is one of them, because I want to just give you some of the symptoms of dehydration, and if you experience any of these symptoms, I would certainly call it to the attention of a healthcare professional. Again, aside from replenishing what is lost in order to hydrate the blood and tissues, water also has a very important function of lubricating joints. It regulates temperature, it moistens the lungs to allow for breathing, and if you don't have an adequate water intake over time, it prevents these processes from occurring and could lead to things like arthritis, sore muscles, heavy breathing, higher body temperature, and so on. In the body, water also acts as a solvent, a coolant, lubricant, and a transport agent. Virtually, as I said earlier, nothing takes place in the body without water playing a critical role. It's needed to regulate body temperature, carry nutrients, remove toxins and waste materials, and provide a medium in which all cellular chemical reactions take place. So here are the symptoms of dehydration. I mean, these could be symptoms of other things too, but they are also symptoms of dehydration. Again, to find out what might be actually causing a symptom, don't try to doctor yourself. Go to a competent healthcare professional and try to figure out why you might be having these symptoms. Symptoms of dehydration can be confusion, chronic fatigue, drowsiness, labored speech, dry mouth, sunken eyeballs, and probably a more obvious symptom would be not being able to urinate or passing only a small amount of urine, which will usually be darker in color, sometimes like a dark tannish or brownish or very, dark, richer color. Urine really should be pale, almost no color at all. And if you're not really feeling that thirsty and your urine is pale, it's probably an indication that you are getting enough of a fluid intake. But those are some of the things you want to pay attention to. And again, even short-term water deprivation has been known to cause chronic pain. And over time, lack of water can cause loss of muscle tone, excess weight gain, slow metabolism, and increased toxicity, and even organ failure. Other negative effects, as I mentioned earlier, could be arthritis, dry skin, migraines, hypertension, digestive complications, persistent constipation, and even possibly an elevated cholesterol level. So, in order to maintain health, the kidneys must excrete a minimum of 10 ounces of waste per day. When water is not available, there is nothing present in which to dissolve the body's waste products, which are things like uric acid and urea, for expulsion. As a result, these toxic waste products that are not being diluted and excreted by water, they build up in the body, and they can lead to crystallization, and they could lead to kidney stones, possibly even gallstones, and it will also put an additional strain on the kidneys to find adequate liquid with which to expel toxins. So again, if you can imagine, if I had a glass in front of me and I put maybe some sugar or salt in that glass, and then I just added a little bit of water, that salt or sugar would not dissolve. There's not enough fluid to dissolve that buildup. As I add more water, I get a better, the ingredients there start to dissolve. Okay? And it's the same thing in the body. Without enough water, some of these byproducts and toxic waste will start to turn into crystals, into stones, and we know that one of the main ways to reduce the risk of kidney stones is to have a very good fluid intake. I just want to mention that I just want to give you some foods that really also have a good amount of water. We mentioned fruits and vegetables are about 75% water, and even bread is more than 30% water. Other specific types of fruits and vegetables that really contain large amounts of water, somewhere between 90 and 99%, include things like tomatoes, cucumbers, squash, lettuce, celery, watermelon, orange, grapefruit, and broccoli contain large amounts of water. So eating healthy has more benefits than just losing weight. It is a way to increase your energy, your mood, your hydration, and overall a way to stay healthy and stay hydrated. That's really what we're talking about, especially as we come into the summer months. Very important to have a good fluid intake. And once again, too much of a good thing may not be a good thing. There are some people that could actually drink too much water, or have too many fluids. As the Rambam says, too much of even a good food is harmful. And he even goes as far to say it's better to eat a little bit of a bad food than too much of a good food, because of the health problems that overindulgence can cause. And with water, fluids in general, if you overconsume way beyond what you really need, you could dilute the electrolytes in the body, and you can have health consequences from that as well. So I think you see everything in the world is really a balance, and even your fluid intake has to be properly balanced. I just want to conclude by letting you know that I am the author of a book called L'Chaim, 18 Chapters to Live By. It's a Torah-based book with endorsements from a lot of leading Rabbanim. It's devoted to health and how to stay healthy and well. If anybody's interested in a copy, they can contact me. My contact information is on the promotion for these health series. I'll just give you a phone number if it makes it easier, 718-544-4036. I want to thank you for listening, and again, please keep in mind this is a series. This was part 2. We hope to continue next week with part 3. Thank you for joining us.